Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society Windows Office and AI meeting for the month of May 2026. Uh, I'm going to open up the floor to problems, questions in general, uh, comments, issues we might need to know about. I've got one offhand. Nobody's got anything, huh? Not even Dennis. Holy mackerel.
Um,
History. Go ahead,
uh,
Harry.
In the list that you had sent out is a reference to something going to be happening with Microsoft on May 20th. I have to profess my ignorance. What does that refer to?
That's part of the presentation.
And it's not Microsoft. Not
No, it's not
just.
mandatory. This is advice, and you
Yeah.
either accept it or you ignore it.
I
And
thought the item, maybe there was a separate item, but there was something about Chrome browser as well. Something
yes,
you do have
same
to
same
pay
thing.
attention to. Yeah.
Also, the one that applies to Chrome can also apply to Edge.
Edge.
Guaranteed on that one. Um,
Yep. Lots of fun stuff coming up.
Offhand, in case somebody here hasn't heard about it. Number one, I've taken most of my Chrome browsers and undeleted them. So I may still have some systems I only use occasionally that might still have it on it. They'll be removed also. Um, both Chrome and Edge are downloading a 4 GB database for AI purposes on your local machine. There are ways of removing the database, but it could come back at any time. So you would have to keep watch for it. Now, I've been mostly switching to the Brave browser. Now, in the Brave browser, you may not be aware of it. It's one of the highly rated privacy browsers. But recently, they came out with a version of browser that has no AI, no rewards, and no wallet in it. However, if you're a Windows user, it would cost you $60 one-time charge to use that stripped down version. If you're on Linux, you can get that stripped down version for absolutely nothing.
uh,
So
so on Windows, what you do is load Windows subsystem for Linux, and then you can run that Brave browser.
actually, there are some people, and myself included, I have multiple computers, and I have Windows on many of them. I have Linux on many of them, and I have one recent computer that was given to me that the owner didn't want anymore. I played around with it a little bit, tried some ideas out, spent a little bit of money, not much. It was under $63, I think, in total. Um, and I made it a true dual boot with a separate drive for Windows and a separate drive for a Linux Mint. And I then made some changes to the BIOS so that the unit could be booted up not originally from the internal drive which has Windows, but from the Linux drive, which is an add-on. And it brings up the grub menu, allowing me to go ahead and launch Mint, or I can launch Windows. And some people think that the launch of Windows by that grub menu is better, more efficient than Microsoft's own launching of Windows. I'll leave
I
that
would
one to
agree with
somebody else.
you based on everything that I've read on the internet that the way that you're doing it is the only really right way to do it. That if you do it the other way around and you have Microsoft do the controlling, you could end up losing access to Linux until you fix it.
I haven't lost anything to Windows whatsoever. And generally speaking, Microsoft to drive one, where it is stored, they can do whatever they want to that drive in changes month to month, year to year, etc. It doesn't matter because it's treated at that time as the only drive with Windows on it. And when I want to use Linux, it's on a completely different drive.
Mm-hmm.
And the two stay separate. You when you do a normal dual boot operation with one drive, where you got Windows and you got a Linux distro, quite often Windows doesn't play nice. They wipe out the grub menu that normally would come up, and all you see is Windows now, and it looks like you totally lost your Linux. It's there. Now you got to get certain tools to go in and be able to find that and relink to it and recreate the grub menu so that you can then have the choice of Windows and or Linux. That's not for most of the newbies out there trying out Linux. I guarantee it, because
Yeah.
I suffered through that for a number of years before I said, "This is nuts. I'm not playing that game anymore. I either have a machine that's for Windows or I have it for Linux. This is one machine that has both, and they're all separated." And
Yep.
that's the only way I see doing both OSs on one machine.
Well, I do something similar because I have a laptop and I have two drives in it, but I don't want to dedicate one to Linux. So what I do is I have an external SSD that's about the size of a flash drive, and I installed Linux on that. And then if I want to have boot into Linux and have my computer be all Linux, then I just hit F12 on the when it's booting up, and tell it to boot off the secondary drive, and I'm in Linux.
Yeah, that's very similar to what I do, except I use enclosures.
Yeah, and I use on some of my machines enclosures also, or just a USB to
Yeah,
drive type attachment for 2.5-inch drives that I don't put in
this
the
is
house.
this is my Linux machine.
Yeah, I've got some just like that. I've got both SATA and NVMe versions, but those are in housings. Whereas on my old 2.5-inch SATA drives, some are in housings also that you can just pick up and take and go to any machine, plug it in and boot it up. But a lot of my
Yeah.
drives are loose. I have adapters that is USB to SATA header, and I just plug it in a particular drive, plug it into the machine, boot up off of it, do what I want. When I'm done, disconnect it, and then I can use the internal drive again.
Yep.
I've done all those things. I've even had one machine years back that finally crapped out that I had two internal drives. Both of them had a version, slightly different version of Windows on it, which was Windows 10 at the time. And then I had a total of 11 distros of Linux on the 2 drives. And it worked fine until finally the machine itself crapped out. It basically died. And I said, that was enough of that experiment. It was educational, but at the same time too, I have reduced the number of distros that I mess with.
I pretty much only use 2, either Ubuntu or Mint.
Ubuntu, I only have one version of Ubuntu. Most of the time, I did not like most of the distros of Ubuntu, but the one I do have and still have at the moment is Cinnamon Ubuntu. Originally, it was a community created version that was adapted by Conical in 23. I don't know exactly what month. So it's a supported version. And it looks like any distro other than Linux Mint, right now 22.3. All other versions of Linux operating system, whether it's Arch, even Fedora, or you take in Debian LMDE version, yes, it's a Cinnamon desktop, but it doesn't have some of the refinements you see in standard Mint. And some of those are because of characteristics of the underlying Ubuntu code. The big problem right now with Ubuntu 26.04 is it's not quite, but very close to twice the size it previously was. And also Conical, and as well as IBM, who owns Red Hat, which is even part of the Fedora family, are pushing into AI heavily, but some are talking about making it an opt-in option where you would get the regular OS like we are used to. But if you want to, you can add in the features of the AI if that suits your needs and desires. It's just one of those things where I'd rather have the opt-in rather than an opt-out, because technically speaking, some of the browsers are taking the approach of opting out. Firefox browser is a good example. They could tell that a lot of resistance was in the wind for AI in the browser. So they created a switch. And in the settings options, you have the AI category. You go to it. You can take 4 or 5 categories they've got listed on the lower part and say, okay, I want this one blocked, I want this one blocked, or I'll be okay with the other 3 or something like that. You pick and choose what you want to accept and not accept. Or there's a switch up above that's turned off. If you turn that switch on, it automatically blocks all the AI. But it's still code that is in the browser. It's not a case where you can get the browser as is without AI and opt in by them adding in the necessary support code for the AI. That would be a better choice. Harry?
In Firefox, I use Firefox, but I wasn't aware of that. Is there a particular engine, a particular AI service that it links to, or it gives you a choice?
This is something that started with version 149, and I think the current version is 151.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and if any of you are interested, there is a fork of Firefox that's called WaterFox, and that does not have all of the AI crap in it.
yes, but also WaterFox has had a reputation of being way behind the releases of the code. So how safe it is as far as vulnerabilities, that's a big question. I use LibreWolf, I use Fire Dragon, and I use Zen, and there's one other one. It's not coming to mind right at the moment. But hang on a minute here.
But in Firefox, is it its own AI that's built in, or is it accessing a larger AI?
Here. This is Firefox. Now, if you come over to the hamburger, whoops, I wish they would quit doing that. You go over to the hamburger, and you, now this is something brand new, and I left it as is. You can show a menu bar, you can show several news things, trending, and show home. For me, I don't care for any of it, so I would shut those off. Okay. Now, if I, whoops. Now, I want to get to the settings, which they moved to the top. I don't know why, but they did. And if I go into the settings, come on. Oh, they really changed this version. Let's see. Now I can't even find it in this. 149, I turned it off.
Yeah.
They've changed this one. This is the first look I've had at 151. I haven't had time to mess with
Is
it
that
before. And I, no kidding, always more. Let's see what more does. All right, search, save search, search suggestions, country, language, voice control.
what are you looking
Default
for?
settings. Hey, that's nice. I can get back
Oh,
to
it's just regular settings?
yeah.
That's off the hamburger menu.
I was in the hamburger menu, but I got more options, and then I got down at the bottom of these settings here, use default settings.
I saw on the hamburger menu an option that was just called settings. It was about 3 or 4 entries from the top.
Well, I could take off search suggestions. Usually that's nothing that's worth anything. But
It has a search bar. You could type in what you want to search for. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's search the web. Never mind. A lot of times they have a search for just for settings, but it looks like they don't.
yeah, well, they got a search here.
But that's probably the search engine.
Yeah, well, it's not giving you the ability to type in.
No, it's not. No, what browser is this?
Can't remember. Hang on a minute.
Right. Yeah, there's settings right there, right above you.
Here we go. AI controls. And I've got mine turned on everybody else is off. So you got this here, but it looks like they're trying to hide this old settings with a new one. And if you don't play around to find that default settings, you don't get this old settings control, which gives you more granular control over what your various settings are. Now mine, I usually have that set to automatically start up, I mean, not that one, previous, open previous windows and tabs. And then under this one here, home, under most of mine, I turn all this junk off. It doesn't interest me in the least. I've got other ways of getting that kind of information. Search, I change to DuckDuckGo, it's private. I turn off the suggestions there. I turn all this off here as well. And I then go into privacy security. I usually use strict, but on this one here, I haven't used Firefox very much on this particular computer. And I'll have a VPN. I don't know if it's if you have to pay if you go past 50 gigabytes a month. But while you've
Which
got
VPN is it?
Pardon?
Oh, that's the built-in Firefox VPN.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's what the actual limit is.
Right here. It says get 50 gigabytes free per
Oh, right.
month. Now that's not much. So the next question becomes, what would they charge you for a paid version?
Well, if you do the get started, there might be an option to find out.
Most of passwords, I turn this stuff off. Why? Because I got a password manager. I use the password manager. I'm not saving any passwords or passkeys in any browser on any machine, period.
That's a good idea.
And then I come down, I block pop-ups, etc. Data collection, I usually shut this off.
Get started.
Trust me, they got enough of my information. They don't need more. Deceptive content and certificates, I leave alone. This is something that came up in tips and tricks meeting that about, well, certain browsers block all the stuff. It doesn't do it automatically in most cases. It gives you an option like Firefox does here. If I say don't enable HTTPS only mode, it allows you to type in any URL, whether it's secured or not secured, at your own risk. If I say enable HTTPS mode in private windows, I don't use private windows, and the reason I don't use them, they're not private. The only private part about it is whatever you do on your machine in private mode is erased when you close the browser. However, all other information is out there on the internet, period. So it's not the privacy people expect. So I only do HTTPS on Windows itself. DNS over HTTPS, yes, but you have to go either increased protection like I have here or maximum. Increased, it will try and do it through a cloud provider and try and get you a hidden DNS access. However, it's not guaranteed. If you want a guarantee that all your traffic is being filtered by the cloud public account, you have to go to maximum protection. And once you do either one of these up here, you get whatever the default is, which is usually Cloudflare. However, you can manage Cloudflare and change it to something else that you know you can contact for DNS lookup. Cloudflare is one of the major providers of doing that. You'll have to look at all the other cloud-based DNS search engines and see if they provide the same kind of protection of your request for an IP address like Cloudflare does. And not all of them do. Guarantee you that. So these are some of the main things. But boy, they're really making some changes. I have a feeling since Google provides a lot of the financing for Mozilla, who owns Firefox, that they have a substantial amount of influence in getting the AI into the Firefox browser. I could be wrong about that, but I do know that they are very heavy contributors to Mozilla.
I just went into the Mozilla VPN and asked it what happens if I go beyond 50 gigabytes. And it offered me the opportunity to subscribe to get unlimited data.
I figured that. How much is the subscription?
If you pay annually, it comes out to $44.99 a month plus tax. So it's $59.88 a year.
Well, depending on your pocketbook and how much you want to have some level of privacy from your snooping ISP provider, you need to use.
You can subscribe to the one I use for less money than that.
Well, there's plenty of them out there. I mean, they're a dime a dozen, so to speak, as is. But be aware, Utah has passed a law that also can prevent your use of VPNs, and that legislation type might expand. Right now, there's a rumor that if Linux doesn't do the age attestation, that like Texas and Louisiana, to name two, would ban the use of Linux as an operating system. That could also affect, of course, Android as well. And then you have Colorado. They made a strange change to their law. At first, they were looking at making an exemption for open source. Well, they made a lot of provisions that would eliminate most Linux distros and open source programs that are even used in Windows to block them if they don't verify age. But not all the laws still require validation, only that they request each user of the computer who's supposed to have their own accounts. You don't let children use your adult account. If that were ever found out, you'd be in legal deep doo-doo. And that's not a joke. The way this is all panning out right now, it's getting to be one big bad joke. Okay.
And then on another topic, before I forget, one of the new rclone clients, GUI clients, that they have a few different programs that give you a graphical user interface for rclone. One of the newer ones that still has some bugs to work out, but is a relatively nice front end for rclone. The developer offered me a coupon code that I can hand out to anybody or in as many people as were interested. So if you ever get interested, you're probably not tonight. If you ever do get interested, I have a 37% off coupon for anybody that wants one.
What specific piece of software is it?
It's called rclone UI.
Yeah, I vaguely heard of that one. I didn't have time to dig into it, but I did notice it.
Yeah, and I do some free technical support for rclone, and I made a posting about something, and the developer of rclone UI saw my posting and sent me a message asking me if I would like some coupon code to hand out to people that I see on Zoom.
I don't know how many Windows users know of, let alone use rclone. If you're in Linux, that's a little bit higher profile, but not a lot.
Yeah, if you're more likely to look for something like rclone when you use Linux because it can mount your Google Drive and your OneDrive and other drives in Linux that you don't have access to on Windows. You can access OneDrive and Google Drive and pCloud and others on Windows relatively easily without rclone. Um, rclone is really reserved for people like I have two OneDrive accounts. You can't have two OneDrive accounts in Windows. So one of them is my regular OneDrive account, and the other one is on rclone.
Well, offhand, there's a lot of people that are also not real astute on image backups. And one of the articles that I've got in the handout is about what's the value of an image backup. And it's by Ask Leo. Very good video. It's worth at least listening to. And it gives you the real proper reasons and use of an image backup, and what some person who had written him was doing. He was tired, I guess, of his old machine. He was using macro and reflect on the machine to make image backups. But when he went out and bought a new computer, he went to restore one of the last images he made, and it didn't work worth a nickel. And that's because he didn't really read all the documentation to start with. That macro and reflect, I don't think it's in any of the old versions, but in just the newer X version by subscription. It's got a feature called redeploy. Redeploy allows you to take the image created on one machine, put it on another machine, and it will prevent conflicts of settings that you have and drivers set up for the old machine. It'll correct it for the new machine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I know that I've used the old macro and reflect to image a drive to a new drive, but that new drive went into the same computer.
Yeah, almost anybody who's used image backups generally ends up doing the same thing, because it's the same thing as if you had a drive die in your machine. Now,
Yeah.
well, you got to replace it with a blank drive. You then take your rescue media, boot the system up off of it, tell it to restore the image, and if the drive is not smaller won't work. But if it's the same size or bigger, you're okay. If it's bigger than the original drive, which a lot of people do, you then have to learn how to use a partitioning piece of software to move things over and expand the size of them to take full advantage of the larger capacity of the drive. Otherwise, you have the same size image and a lot of empty space not being used by anything. If you are trying to put an image for, say, a 256 gigabyte image drive onto, say, a 128 or a 120 drive, it's not going to work. The first thing you have to do, you have to try and shrink the 256 gigabyte drive's total capacity down to where it will have an image that can be restored to a 128 or a 120 drive. And that's the only way to do downsizing versus upsizing.
Yeah. Well, upsizing is more difficult today. I don't know if any of you have gone to Amazon lately and looked at the pricing on SSDs, but I have. And
It's outrageous.
I have a Samsung 4 terabyte drive that I paid about $275 for when I bought it, and that same drive today, and I looked at it yesterday, is $749.
Oh yeah, I've seen some things. Have any of you used something like an Xbox or a PlayStation? I have had some of those in the past, and they were in the neighborhood of $500, between $500 and $600, brand new. Now, if you look at them today, they're just shy of $1,000.
Yeah.
Have you checked out some drives?
Pardon?
Some drives have gone way up. They're double what they used to be.
Oh yeah. RAM prices are outrageous, especially DDR5. You also have outrageous prices on SSDs. Any GPU right now, it's hard to find somebody selling new GPU cards with more than 12 gigabytes. If you see a new one at prices below a couple grand, buy it, because a lot of those GPU cards are going in the $3,000 to $5,000 category. That's not a joke. And also large capacity hard drives that may be used in NASAs and servers are being gobbled up. And so if you can find any new ones on the market, they're outrageous prices. Even used RAM, SSDs, GPUs, and large capacity drives, spinning hard drives, they're very expensive. Why? Because the new stuff is outrageous. Therefore, they are able to escalate the prices on the used equipment. And it also affects DDR4 memory. There are some motherboard manufacturers that are making new boards as dual memory. They will support DDR4 and DDR5. And that's so that they can sell new boards still without going out of business, to populate them with a DDR4 memory. Most used equipment, if you buy computers used, the maximum memory you will ever see on them is 8 gigs being offered in most cases, not all cases. I have seen some where maybe an individual is trying to sell their own machine versus a vendor, and it may say that it's got 16 gigs of memory. Hopefully it does, I don't know. But also too, you may see more machines with, if they don't have 8 gigs, you'll only see 4 gigs or no memory. It's up to you to get your own memory. It's up to you, in some cases, to get your own drive. So, and even there, you can get bare bones units that don't even have the CPU. So you have to have the CPU as well. It's a crazy world out there right now, and it's not getting any better. And Samsung's got a strike going on right now, partly because one of the other manufacturers, I don't remember if it was Micron or SK, has given generous amounts of profits to the employees. And I guess Samsung was trying to get away with less. And so there's a strike, and they may be stopping all production of RAM memory and any SSD stuff for at least a couple of weeks. Kind of like the MTA New York rail strike, but at least that got settled. I don't think Samsung's going to have as easy a time. Oh. All right, is there anything else in open forum here that anybody wants to cover? If not, I'll start doing the presentation.
I just want to say one thing about the free edition of Macarene Reflect 8.0. I got a driver blacklisted by Microsoft, and it's the PS mount, which means you can no longer mount with that version. You can no longer mount an image and do the things you used to be able to do by mounting them.
In other words,
that now requires 8.1 or X.
Yeah, if you can get your 8.1, good luck. But otherwise, generally speaking, if you have an installed version, it hasn't had an update in a long time. Basically, what Bob's saying, if you're up to date on your Windows updates, you may have a driver now that will prevent the current Macarene Reflect from launching. And the only thing you have as an option is the rescue media. You can still use the rescue media, and you can do backups as well as restore on the rescue media. So that is an alternative option. If we get an update to the old 8 to 8.1 that circumvents this particular problem, that's great. That's gravy.
Yeah, if you're willing to go without the blacklist security, you can disable it.
Okay,
There is a command way.
Well, that's an option too, but at the same time too, that might be a little bit risky for at least a lot of people because they're not that tech savvy. I mean, I could handle that. It's just a case where not everybody's tech savvy enough to be able to either go in and disable a given piece of software, a service, edit the registry and make changes there, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, for a long time, I've been recommending that people take these Black Friday deals that Paramount Software gives for Macarene Reflect 10, and I got mine 4 licenses for $25 each one time, and that price stuck. So I continue to get any updates, at least as long as they stay on version 10. If they go to a version 11, I don't know.
Well, it's hard to say whether that'll happen or not, but generally speaking, there's a lot of people that do mind having subscriptions. There's a lot of people who willy-nilly add on a subscription, stop using whatever the piece of software is, forget that they even have the subscription, and are bewildered by some of their monthly cash outlays until they find out, oh, you got umpteen subscriptions you're not even using. Why are you
Yeah.
still paying?
Yeah, not to mention the fact that there's still free alternatives out there that do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can transition.
yeah. It's just a case where, again, some of this gets into change, going from the free version of Macro Reflect to a subscription. That bothers a lot of people.
Yeah, I
I've
still
had-
use the free
I've
version.
had both, and I've used both.
Um, the only reason that I would want to go to the paid version, well, there's two reasons. One is you can do incremental backups, which you can't do with the free version. You can only do differentials. And the second thing would be if you want to convert the image into a virtual machine, which I have done, you can only use Microsoft Virtual Machine with the free version, but you can use either VMware or VirtualBox with the paid version.
Well, I agree with you on the virtual machine part, but as far as I go with the backup, I only use the full images. However, when I have in the past had both incremental and differential, I don't like incremental. And yes, it can be very quick and small files, but when you have to restore the last backup you had, you have to go through every incremental update that you've done or backup that you've done from the oldest to the present last version you backed up. And that could be 30 some odd files possibly. So that's a downside. Differential creates one file, and that
Yeah.
just keeps growing in size, but it always has the minimum amount you need. So you do your image backup restore, then you do the restore of the differential backup, you're done.
Yes. What I would do if I had the option is a combination of the two, is to do a differential as my regular normal backup.
Yes.
You can set that up before you go to bed at night, and it's done when you wake up in the morning. And secondly, if I'm going to install a piece of new software, I normally do a restore point, but if I had the option, I would do an incremental backup only for the purpose of doing it before installing some new software.
Well, you have to remember, I forget exactly which version, I think it was 2019, Microsoft turned off restore points. So you have to know that in late versions of 10 and 11, it's turned off. You have to
Yes,
know where
I
to
turn it back
go.
on.
You have to know where to go. You have to turn it on yourself in order to create either automatically or manual restore points. And then when you do a Windows backup, it will create a restore point before doing the update. However, there is a gotcha now for those who don't know about that piece of information, don't know how to go in and find it and turn it on. They now have added or are about to add, and it may be done over a period of time. So many people get the added feature over time, is they have a restore point available. If you can't boot up and you get the startup screen where it says, hey, something didn't go right, and you got troubleshooting advanced, now in there, it has the restore point, but it's now talking about the restore point that's brand new, that's strictly for backing up drivers. So that if you get a bad driver, all you're doing is removing the new drivers from Windows, but all the rest of the update took place and is not reversible unless you have the old restore point available.
Yeah, I have a task manager job that creates one every other day.
Well, if we don't get going on the presentation, we are not going to get through much. Let's see. It's not- Hang on a minute. I gotta be on the right machine. All right. Now, okay. Now, come
Mark your calendar, May 20th, 2025. Circle it, highlight, because that is the date that Microsoft has chosen as the final enforcement deadline for a policy change that most people have not heard about, do not understand, and will not see coming until it is too late to opt out. On that date, if you are running Windows 11 with a Microsoft account, if you have OneDrive installed, if you are using any of the integrated cloud services that come preloaded on modern Windows devices, Microsoft is going to flip a switch. And that switch is going to change the default behavior of your operating system from storing your files locally on your own hard drive to automatically syncing everything to Microsoft's cloud servers, whether you explicitly chose that or not. They are calling it mandatory sync. And what it means in practice is that your documents, your photos, your desktop files, your browser data, your application settings, everything that used to live privately on your computer is going to be uploaded to the cloud and stored on servers that Microsoft controls that are subject to Microsoft's terms of service, that can be accessed by Microsoft's AI training systems, and that can be handed over to law enforcement or other third parties under circumstances defined by Microsoft's privacy policy, not by you. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation. This is official Microsoft policy documented in service updates that began rolling out in March 2025, and that reached final enforcement on May 20th. And the reason most people have not heard about it is because Microsoft has been extraordinarily quiet about the implications. They have framed it as a feature update, enhanced cloud integration, seamless cross-device experience, better data protection through automatic backup. All of those things sound positive. All of those things sound like benefits. But buried in the technical documentation, in the terms of service updates that pop up and ask you to click agree without reading, in the default settings that are enabled without your explicit action, is a fundamental change in the architecture of how Windows handles your data. And that change moves control away from you and toward Microsoft in ways that have serious privacy implications, serious security implications, and for anyone who handles sensitive information, confidential, business data, legal documents, medical records, financial information, serious legal and professional implications. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what is happening on May 20th, what mandatory sync actually means at a technical level, why this is the second phase of what privacy advocates are calling the Great Lockdown, the first phase being recall and the AI screenshot monitoring we have already talked about, and what your options are if you want to stay private. Because here's the reality. After May 20th, staying on Windows 11 with a Microsoft account and maintaining genuine local-only file storage is going to require deliberate technical action. It is not going to be the default. It is not going to be the easy path. Microsoft is making Cloud Sync the default and making local-only storage something you have to fight for. And for most users, the path of least resistance is going to be accepting the new defaults, not because they chose cloud storage, but because they did not realize they needed to actively reject it. You have 1 week, maybe less, depending on when you are watching this. 1 week to decide whether you are going to accept Microsoft's new terms, whether you're going to allow your local files to be synced to the cloud, or whether you're going to take action to maintain control over your own data. This is your last week to stay private on Windows. Let me show you what is at stake and what you need to do. Let us start with what mandatory sync actually means, because the term itself is deliberately vague. Microsoft is not saying that on May 20th, they are going to reach into your computer and copy every file to the cloud without your permission. That would be too obvious. That would generate immediate backlash. What they are doing is much more subtle and much more effective. They are changing the default settings for new users and for existing users who have not explicitly configured their sync preferences. And they are changing the behavior of core Windows features, the desktop folder, the documents folder, the pictures folder, so that anything you save to those locations is automatically uploaded to OneDrive, unless you have taken specific steps to disable that behavior. For anyone setting up a new Windows 11 computer after May 20th, the setup process is going to enable OneDrive folder sync by default. You will still have the option to turn it off, but it will be buried in settings, and the prompts during setup will strongly encourage you to keep it on. They will tell you it is for your protection, that it backs up your files in case your computer crashes, that it lets you access your documents from any device. All technically true. But what they will not tell you, at least not prominently, is that once your files are in OneDrive, they are on Microsoft's servers, subject to Microsoft's data policies, and accessible to Microsoft's systems in ways that local-only files are not. For existing users, the ones who already have Windows 11 installed and have been using it for months or years, the change is going to be pushed through a service update. You will get a notification, probably a full-screen prompt, that says something like, protect your files with OneDrive, or keep your documents safe with automatic backup. It will have a big friendly button that says turn on protection or enable backup. And if you click that button, or if you dismiss the prompt without reading it carefully and Windows interprets that as consent, OneDrive folder sync will be enabled. Your desktop, documents, and pictures folders will be redirected to OneDrive. And everything in those folders, everything you save to those folders in the future, will be uploaded to the cloud automatically. The files will still appear on your computer. You will still see them in File Explorer, but behind the scenes, they are being synced to Microsoft's servers in real time. And this is where the term mandatory becomes relevant, because once this sync is enabled, turning it off is not straightforward. If you go into OneDrive settings and try to disable folder sync, Windows will warn you that your files might be deleted from your computer. It will tell you that disabling sync could result in data loss. This is technically accurate, because if you have been saving files to what you thought was your local desktop folder, but was actually a OneDrive synced folder, and you disable sync, those files will no longer be in the location where you expect them. They will still be in OneDrive, accessible through a web browser, but they might not be on your local hard drive anymore unless you explicitly download them. This creates a situation where users are functionally locked into using OneDrive once it is enabled, because disabling it is confusing, potentially risky, if you do not understand the file structure and actively discouraged by the operating system. Microsoft has designed the experience to make enabling sync easy and disabling it difficult. And for users who are not technically confident, who do not want to risk losing files, who just want their computer to work without having to think about cloud storage architecture, the path of least resistance is to leave sync enabled and accept that their files are going to the cloud. This is what makes it mandatory in practice, even if it is technically optional. The option to say no exists, but it is hidden, it is scary, and it is designed to make you second guess whether you should do it. That is dark pattern design. That is using interface choices and warning messages to manipulate user behavior. And it is the same approach that Microsoft has used for years to push users toward Microsoft accounts instead of local accounts, toward Edge instead of other browsers, toward Bing instead of other search engines. Make the thing Microsoft wants you to do easy and obvious. Make the alternatives hard and hidden. Now let us talk about what happens to your data once it is in OneDrive, because this is where the privacy and security implications become clear. When your files are stored locally on your computer, the only people who can access them are people who have physical access to your device or remote access through malware or hacking. You control the device, you control the physical security, you control whether you install antivirus software, whether you encrypt your hard drive, whether you use strong passwords. The attack surface is limited to your device and your network. When your files are stored in OneDrive, they are on Microsoft's servers. Microsoft controls those servers. Microsoft controls the security of those servers. Microsoft controls who has access to those servers. In Microsoft's privacy policy, the legal document you agreed to when you signed up for a Microsoft account gives Microsoft very broad rights to access your data. According to Microsoft's terms, they can access your files if they need to comply with legal obligations, if they need to enforce their terms of service, if they need to protect the security of their systems, or if they need to provide services you have requested. That last category is particularly broad. Providing services includes things like indexing your files so you can search them, scanning your files for malware, analyzing your files with AI to offer suggestions or auto-categorization. All of those services require Microsoft systems to read your files. Not a human necessarily, but automated systems that process your content. Microsoft has also been very clear in recent years that they are using cloud data to train AI models. Copilot, their AI assistant, is built on large language models that are trained on massive data sets. And while Microsoft says they do not train on your personal files without consent, the definition of consent in their terms of service includes using their services with AI features enabled. If you use Windows 11 with Copilot enabled, if you use Office 365 with AI suggestions turned on, you are, according to the terms, consenting to Microsoft analyzing your content to provide those features. And the line between analyzing your content to provide a feature and analyzing your content to improve the models that power that feature is very thin. This is the same issue we have talked about with Google and Chrome. The data collection is justified as necessary to provide services you benefit from. But the secondary use, the model training, the behavioral profiling, the monetization, happens in the background and is not something most users understand or explicitly agree to. There's also the legal access issue. Data stored on Microsoft's servers is subject to legal requests from governments and law enforcement. If a court issues a warrant or a subpoena for your OneDrive data, Microsoft will comply. They have to. That is the law. And because your files are on their servers, they can access them and turn them over. If your files are stored only on your local hard drive, law enforcement would need physical access to your device or a sophisticated remote hacking operation to get that data. The barrier is much higher. Cloud storage lowers that barrier significantly. For most people, this is not a concern. They are not doing anything illegal. They do not expect to be the target of law enforcement. But there are plenty of legitimate reasons why someone might not want their files accessible to third parties even with a warrant. Journalists protecting sources, lawyers protecting client confidentiality, activists in countries with authoritarian governments, whistleblowers, people in abusive relationships who need to keep certain information private, medical professionals handling patient data, businesses handling trade secrets. For all of these use cases, cloud storage introduces risks that local storage does not. And then there is the breach risk. Microsoft's servers are a target. They are a high-value target for hackers, for nation-state actors, for organized crime. And while Microsoft spends enormous amounts of money on security, breaches happen. In 2023, Microsoft disclosed that a hacking group had accessed customer email accounts, including government accounts. In 2024, there were reports of vulnerabilities in Microsoft's cloud infrastructure that could have allowed unauthorized access to user data. These are not hypotheticals. These are real incidents. And every time your data is stored on a centralized server, you are trusting that the security of that server is perfect and that it will remain perfect forever. One breach, one vulnerability, one misconfiguration, and your files could be exposed. When your files are local, the attack surface is your device. When your files are in the cloud, the attack surface is every device that connects to that cloud, every server that stores that cloud data, every network that transmits that data, every employee who has administrative access to those systems. The risk multiplies. Now, Microsoft will tell you, and they have been saying this in their marketing, that OneDrive files are encrypted. And that is true. But there is a very important distinction that most people do not understand. OneDrive uses encryption in transit and encryption at rest. Encryption in transit means the data is encrypted while it is being uploaded from your computer to Microsoft's servers, so no one can intercept it on the network. Encryption at rest means the data is encrypted while it is sitting on Microsoft's servers, so if someone physically steals a hard drive from a data center, they cannot read the data without the encryption key. Both of those are good. But here's the catch. Microsoft holds the encryption keys, not you. Microsoft. That means Microsoft's systems can decrypt your files anytime they need to. When you search your files through OneDrive's web interface, Microsoft decrypts them so the search can read the content. When you open a file in Office Online, Microsoft decrypts it. When their automated systems scan for malware or analyze content for AI features, they decrypt it. The encryption protects your data from outside attackers. It does not protect your data from Microsoft. There's a different kind of encryption called end-to-end encryption or zero-knowledge encryption, where the encryption keys are held only by you, not by the service provider. Services like Proton Drive, Tresorit, and Sync.com offer this. With true end-to-end encryption, the service provider cannot decrypt your files even if they wanted to, even if they received a legal order, even if their servers were breached, because they do not have the keys. Only you do. Microsoft does not offer this for OneDrive. They could, technically, but they do not, because it would prevent them from offering features that require reading your content. Search, AI suggestions, malware scanning, collaboration tools. All of those require Microsoft to be able to decrypt and read your files, so they keep the keys. And that means your files in OneDrive are private from everyone except Microsoft. And Microsoft is subject to legal obligations, corporate policies, AI training goals, and security vulnerabilities that you do not control. This brings us to the bigger picture. Why is Microsoft doing this now? Why is May 20th the deadline? The answer is the same reason Google is pushing Manifest v3 in Chrome, the same reason Apple is embedding more AI into iOS, the same reason every major tech company is racing to integrate AI into every product. Data. AI requires data, massive amounts of data. The more data you have, the better your models, the more useful your AI features, the more competitive you are in the market. And user-generated data, the documents you write, the photos you take, the files you organize, is incredibly valuable for training models. Microsoft wants your data in their cloud because data in the cloud is data they can access, analyze, and use. Data on your local hard drive is invisible to them. They cannot use it. They cannot learn from it. They cannot build products around it. Getting as much data as possible into OneDrive is a strategic priority. And May 20th is the deadline because that is when the 2026 service update cycle officially begins. Microsoft operates on annual update cycles. The May 2025 update is the last update before the major 2026 Windows release, and Microsoft wants the cloud sync infrastructure fully deployed, fully adopted, and fully normalized before they roll out the next generation of AI features that will be built on top of that data. Privacy advocates are calling this the second phase of the Great Lockdown. The first phase was Recall, the AI screenshot feature that records everything on your screen. That gives Microsoft visibility into your real-time activity. The second phase is mandatory sync, getting your files into the cloud. That gives Microsoft access to your documents, your history, your creative work, your personal information. Together, these two features create a complete surveillance architecture. What you're doing right now, Recall, what you have created and saved, OneDrive. And both are being positioned as helpful features, productivity tools, AI-powered conveniences. But the effect is total visibility. Microsoft can see what you do, what you make, what you save, what you search for, what you write, what you photograph, everything. And the deadline, May 20th, is when this becomes the default experience for most Windows users. So what do? You have options, but they are not all easy and they require you to make decisions now. This is your last week to act before the deadline. Here are your choices. Option 1, accept it. Decide that the convenience of cloud sync, the automatic backup, the cross-device access is worth the privacy trade-off. Enable OneDrive, let your files sync, and trust Microsoft's security and privacy policies. This is the easiest path. It is what Microsoft wants you to do. It is what most users will do. And for some people, it is a reasonable choice. If you do not handle sensitive information, if you trust Microsoft, if you value convenience over privacy, this might be fine for you. But you should make that choice knowingly, not passively. If you are going to use OneDrive, understand what it means. Your files are on Microsoft servers. They can be accessed by Microsoft's systems. They can be subject to legal requests. They are encrypted, but Microsoft holds the keys. Make the choice with open eyes. Option 2, disable sync and stay on Windows. This is for users who want to keep using Windows but do not want their files in the cloud. It is possible, but it requires some technical steps. First, if you're setting up a new computer or doing a fresh Windows install, during the setup process, when Windows asks you to sign in with a Microsoft account, look for the small text link that says sign in with a local account instead, or offline account. It is deliberately hidden, usually in the bottom left corner. Click that. Create a local account instead of a Microsoft account. This will prevent OneDrive from being enabled by default. If you are already using Windows with a Microsoft account and OneDrive is enabled or being pushed on you, go into Settings, click on Accounts, and look for the option to switch to a local account. This will disconnect your Windows login from your Microsoft account. You will lose some features, like syncing settings across devices, but you will regain control over your files. Next, open OneDrive settings, go to the Backup tab, and turn off backup for desktop, documents, and pictures. Windows will warn you about potential data loss. Ignore the warning if you understand that your files will stay local. Then, go to the Sync tab and click Unlink this PC. This completely disconnects OneDrive from your computer. Finally, uninstall OneDrive entirely. Open Settings, go to Apps, find OneDrive, and uninstall it. You can reinstall it later if you change your mind, but removing it ensures it cannot be re-enabled by a future update without your knowledge. Option 3, switch to a privacy-respecting cloud service. If you do want cloud backup and cross-device sync, but you do not want to give Microsoft access to your files, use a service that offers true end-to-end encryption. ProtonDrive, from the makers of Proton Mail, offers end-to-end encrypted cloud storage with a generous free tier and paid plans for more storage. Tresorit is another option, focused on business users, with zero-knowledge encryption and compliance with European data protection laws. Sync.com is a Canadian service that offers end-to-end encryption and is more affordable than Tresorit. All of these services work on Windows. You install their client, it creates a sync folder on your computer, and anything you put in that folder is encrypted locally before being uploaded. The service provider never has access to your encryption keys. They cannot read your files. They cannot hand them over to authorities, even if ordered to, because they do not have the keys to decrypt them. This is true privacy-respecting cloud storage. You get the convenience of backup and sync without sacrificing control. Option 4, leave Windows entirely. This is the most extreme option, but it is worth mentioning because for some users, it is the right choice. If you're tired of fighting Microsoft's defaults, tired of disabling features that get re-enabled with updates, tired of an operating system that treats your data as a resource to be harvested, you can switch to Linux. Distributions like Linux Mint, Ubuntu, and Fedora offer full-featured desktop environments that look and feel similar to Windows, support most common software, and give you complete control over your system. There is no built-in cloud sync unless you choose to install it. There is no AI monitoring your activity. There is no mandatory account sign-in. There is no telemetry being sent to a corporation. You own your computer. You control your data. The learning curve is real. Some Windows software will not run on Linux, though alternatives exist for most things, and compatibility layers like Wine can run many Windows apps. But if privacy is your priority, if you handle sensitive information professionally, if you are philosophically opposed to surveillance capitalism, Linux is a genuine option. And it is free, completely free. No license fees, no subscriptions, no hidden costs. Whichever option you choose, you need to choose now, this week, before May 20th. Because after that date, the defaults change, the prompts get more aggressive, the path to staying private gets harder. And once your files are synced to OneDrive, once Microsoft has a copy of your documents on their servers, you cannot unring that bell. You can delete them from OneDrive, but you cannot know for certain that they have been deleted from Microsoft's backups, from their AI training datasets, from any systems that may have already processed them. The only way to stay private is to prevent the upload in the first place. And that requires action. Now, let me be very clear about what is at stake here. This is not just about file storage. This is about control. Control over your own data. Control over who can see what you create. Control over whether your personal information, your creative work, your private documents are used to train AI models, are subject to legal requests, are vulnerable to data breaches, or are analyzed by automated systems you did not consent to. For decades, the default assumption was that your computer was yours. The files on your hard drive were yours. They stayed on your device unless you explicitly chose to upload them somewhere. That assumption is being eroded. Microsoft, Google, Apple, all of the major platform companies are moving toward a model where your data lives in their cloud by default, where local storage is the exception rather than the rule, where privacy is something you have to opt into rather than something that is protected by default. And they are doing this not because it is better for you, but because it is better for them. Because data is the most valuable resource in the modern economy. And the more of your data they have, the more valuable their AI products, the more targeted their services, the more powerful their platforms. You do not have to accept this. You do not have to let Microsoft turn your computer into a terminal that feeds data to their cloud. You do not have to sync your files just because the operating system prompts you to. You have choices. Limited choices. Harder choices than they should be, but choices nonetheless. Use a local account instead of a Microsoft account. Disable OneDrive. Use end-to-end encrypted cloud storage if you need sync. Or switch to an operating system that respects your ownership of your own device. Any of these options is better than passively accepting defaults that were designed to benefit Microsoft, not you. May 20th is the deadline, the final lockdown. After that date, staying private on Windows requires fighting against the operating system instead of working with it. It requires knowing where the hidden settings are, knowing which prompts to dismiss, knowing how to disable services that get re-enabled with updates. It requires constant vigilance. And for most people, that is not sustainable, which is exactly what Microsoft is counting on. They are counting on you getting tired of fighting. They are counting on you accepting the new defaults because resisting them is too much work. They are counting on you valuing convenience over control. And for a lot of people, they will be right, but you do not have to be one of those people. This is your last week, your last chance to make a deliberate choice before the choice is made for you by default. Disable OneDrive, switch to a local account, move to end-to-end encrypted storage, or leave Windows for a platform that does not treat your data as a product. Whatever you decide, decide now. Decide consciously. Because on May 21st, the day after the deadline, the Windows you are using will not be the same Windows you have been using. It will be a platform where cloud sync is assumed, where local-only storage is a deviation from the norm, where your files are expected to live on Microsoft servers. And if you have not taken action by then, that will be your new reality. The clock is ticking. You have days, maybe hours depending on when you're watching this. This is your last week to stay private. Use it. Some industry right now that the mainstream conversation has not fully caught up with.
One comment I have, a lot of people don't use MS-365, where you get 1 terabyte of storage, or if you got the family pack, 1 terabyte for each person on the family package. However, most people only get the default 5 gigabytes of space. When you get close to the point where that OneDrive space is full, you will start getting a message. You then need to check the capacity of free space in your OneDrive, just like you can do with your C drive or other drive letters that you have on your system. If you choose to ignore it, you can start having data lost and unretrievable. On the other hand, you have the right to buy additional storage for your account. Generally speaking, so far, 100 megabytes, 100 gigabytes of space is not all that bad of a price. But eventually, if you have to keep adding more and more, you get to the tipping point where you might as well buy the MS-365 subscription, whether you use the software or not. You get and can use 1 terabyte of storage. And even that can be increased at an additional cost. Anybody else got any comments or questions?
Yeah. I just removed the OneDrive app from my account here, which is a local account, and I'm going to later do it in the administrator.
I'm looking at it somewhat too, but at the same time too, there are certain things that I keep with the Microsoft account, but I have disabled the syncing so far to the best of my knowledge. Now it's something that will have to constantly be checked to see that they haven't arbitrarily turned it on to their benefit. But a lot of my systems, I don't think they get as much information as they would hope. But who knows?
And I might add, in the pro versions, there's also a group policy which can block, which can substantially reduce the chance Microsoft will reinstall OneDrive.
Yes. That's, but how many people have it versus how many people are using home? For example, Wayne had at least a laptop with home on it. I don't remember, Wayne, if you changed that to a pro license or not.
No, my Windows 11 is a Pro. When I bought the computer, it was home. I upgraded to Pro.
Okay. Yeah, well, as long as you got the Pro, that means you have the GP edit function that Bob mentioned, where you can go in as a security administrator and make policy changes as to what can or cannot be done on the computer. And as he was saying there, you can prevent OneDrive from syncing up your data up to the cloud.
Well, I noticed when I used Windows Word or I used Excel, I had it set up so that it would not automatically save it to the cloud.
Yeah, but you're going to have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Because you may get prompts to try and get you to accept putting everything up on the cloud, in which case that overrides your current settings. And at the same time, too, there's always the possibility down the road that they might flip the switch for you. And you may not even be aware of it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next one.
Right now, open any news website and Google CNN, BBC, the New York Times, whatever you read regularly. Now look at that page. Actually look at it. See those banner ads at the top? The video ads autoplaying in the corner? The sponsored content blocks scattered between paragraphs? The pop-ups asking you to subscribe? This is not just what the web looks like today. This is what Google, Chrome's future looks like permanently. Because on May 20th, the last remaining defense you have against this digital chaos, your ad blocker, stops working completely. And I do not mean it works less effectively. I mean the underlying technology that allows extensions like uBlock Origin, AdBlock Plus, and every other powerful ad and tracker blocking tool to function at full capacity is being removed from Chrome entirely. Google calls this Manifest v3. They have been talking about it for years, rolling it out in phases, giving developers warnings and timelines. But May 20th is the final enforcement date. After that date, the old extensions that actually work, the ones built on Manifest v2, will be completely disabled in Chrome. They will not load. They will not run. They will disappear from your browser as if they never existed. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what is happening on May 20th, why Google is doing this despite years of protests from developers and privacy advocates, and how this connects to something far bigger that almost no one is talking about. Google's moved to hardwire Chrome into your device at the processor level using something called an NPU, a neural processing unit, to make it functionally impossible to escape Chrome's data collection even if you uninstall it. And I am going to give you a 30-second step-by-step guide to get off Chrome and onto Brave or LibreWolf before May 20th, so that when that deadline hits, you are not staring at an internet you no longer recognize. But first, you need to understand what Manifest v3 actually is and why the change Google is making is not a technical upgrade. It is a business decision.
I paused it there for a moment. It has to do with the NPU. The more modern CPU equipment you have, the likelihood is you have an NPU in your system, whether it's a AMD Ryzen or an Intel Ultra Core processor. If you have older CPUs, they don't have the NPU, and in many cases that stops various processes like they're describing here from working in the first place. It's also a killer for those who know what recall is from Microsoft. Recall puts the hairs on your whole body straight up, and with good reason, because it's very much an invasion of your privacy. And if you don't have an NPU, recall generally is not on your system and cannot function. I'll continue on with the presentation.
Decision disguised as a security improvement. A browser extension is a small program that runs inside your browser and modifies how it behaves, or how web pages are displayed. The most popular category by far is ad blockers and tracker blockers. Tools like uBlock Origin, Privacy Badger, AdBlock Plus. Their job is to detect when a website is trying to load an advertisement or tracking script and stop it before it loads. This happens in real time, silently, thousands of times per browsing session. To do this effectively, These extensions need deep access to your web traffic. They need to see every request your browser makes, every script a website tries to run, every piece of content trying to load. Then they compare those requests against filter lists, databases of known advertising and tracking domains, and block the ones that match. This requires what is called the Web Request API, a piece of Chrome's code that allows extensions to intercept and modify network requests in real time. This API is extraordinarily powerful. It is the reason uBlock Origin can block over 90% of ads and trackers on most websites without breaking functionality. It is the reason you can browse without being followed by remarketing ads. It is the reason pages load faster because ads and tracking scripts are heavy, and extensions using web request stop them from loading at all. Manifest v2 is the framework that has allowed extensions to use the web request API for over a decade. It has been the standard since 2012. Manifest v3 is the new framework Google is forcing all Chrome extensions to migrate to. And the single most significant change is that it removes unrestricted access to web request and replaces it with something called declarative net request. The difference between these two is everything. With web request under Manifest v2, an extension can examine every network request, dynamically apply complex logic, use large filter lists with millions of entries, and make real-time decisions. It is flexible, powerful, and comprehensive. With declarative net request under Manifest v3, extensions must declare in advance a static list of rules about what to block. That list is limited to 30,000 static rules and 5,000 dynamic rules. The extension cannot apply complex logic on the fly. It cannot use the massive crowdsourced filter lists that ad blockers rely on, lists that often contain hundreds of thousands of entries. It cannot adapt in real time to new tracking techniques. It is rigid, limited, and dramatically less effective. The developer of uBlock Origin, one of the most respected figures in ad blocking, publicly stated that uBlock Origin cannot function under Manifest v3 at the same level of effectiveness. The EasyList filter list contains over 75,000 rules. Manifest v3's limit is 30,000 static rules total. That is not enough, not even close. The result is that ad blockers under Manifest v3 will block some ads, maybe even most of the obvious ones, but they will miss a huge percentage of tracking scripts, fingerprinting attempts, malvertising, and sophisticated ad delivery systems. Your browsing experience will visibly degrade. Pages will be slower, ads will reappear, trackers will follow you, pop-ups will return, autoplaying videos will interrupt your reading. The web will feel like it did 15 years ago before effective ad blocking existed. Now, Google has a publicly stated justification for this change. They say Manifest v3 is necessary for security and performance. They argue that web request could be abused by malicious extensions to spy on users. They say declarative net request is safer because the browser enforces the blocking rules. And on the surface, those arguments sound reasonable. But here's the problem. There is no evidence that web request has been a major vector for malicious extensions in practice. Google's Chrome Web Store has review processes and automated scans to catch malicious extensions. The overwhelming majority of extensions that abuse user trust do so in ways that have nothing to do with web request. What removing web request does do, very effectively, is cripple the one category of extensions that directly threatens Google's core business model: advertising. Google is the largest advertising company in human history. In 2023, Alphabet earned over $220 billion in revenue. Roughly 80% came from advertising, targeted advertising, the kind that requires tracking users across the web, building detailed behavioral profiles, and serving personalized ads based on that data. Effective ad blockers interfere with that business model. They do not just block the visual annoyance of ads. They block the tracking infrastructure that makes targeted advertising work. They block Google Analytics, DoubleClick, Google Tag Manager. They block the invisible scripts that follow you from site to site, logging every click, every scroll, every second you spend on a page. When hundreds of millions of people use powerful ad blockers, it reduces the effectiveness and value of the advertising inventory Google sells. Manifest v3 solves that problem for Google, not for users, for Google. And the timeline tells you everything. Google announced Manifest v3 in 2018. Privacy advocates raised concerns immediately. In 2019, developer backlash intensified. The creator of uBlock Origin called it a betrayal of users. Other browser makers took notice. Mozilla announced they would implement Manifest v3 for compatibility, but continue supporting web request because they recognized its importance for privacy tools. Apple announced something similar for Safari. Brave announced they would maintain web request support. So 3 major browser makers looked at Google's justification and said, "We do not agree." Only Google, the company whose business depends on advertising, insisted this change was necessary. In 2022, Google began deprecation. In 2023, they announced the final timeline. And May 20th, 2025, that is the date when Manifest v2 extensions are completely and permanently disabled in all versions of Chrome for all users worldwide. That is days away. Here's what happens on that date if you are still using Chrome. You will open your browser and see a notification that extensions have been disabled. Your ad blocker will be grayed out, marked as unsupported. You will be prompted to replace it with a Manifest v3 version if one exists. Some have released v3 versions. uBlock Origin has uBlock Origin Lite. But every single one is less effective. The developers themselves admit this. You will install the new version. Because what else are you going to do? And for a day or two, you might not notice much. But then you will start seeing ads in places you have not seen them in years. YouTube ads that used to be blocked will play. Banner ads on news sites will reappear. Tracking scripts will follow you again. Your browser will feel slower because blocked content is now loading. And you will realize the web you have been browsing, the clean, fast, private version, was only possible because of tools that no longer work. This is not speculation. Beta testers in Chrome, Canary, and dev channels where Manifest v3 enforcement already began have reported this. The degradation is real, measurable, and exactly what developers warned about. But here's where the story takes a turn almost no one is talking about. Because Manifest v3 is not the end game, it is the setup. Google is not just trying to weaken ad blockers and software. They are building infrastructure to hardwire Chrome into your device at the hardware level so deeply that removing Chrome, or blocking Google's tracking, becomes functionally impossible, even if you uninstall the browser entirely. And the key to this is the NPU, Neural Processing Unit. If you bought a laptop or a smartphone in the last 2 years, especially a high-end one, there's a very good chance it has an NPU built into the processor. Intel calls theirs Intel AI Boost. AMD calls theirs Ryzen AI. Apple has the Neural Engine in M-series chips. Qualcomm has NPUs and Snapdragon processors. An NPU is specialized silicon designed to run machine learning and AI tasks efficiently without using the main CPU or GPU. It handles image recognition, voice processing, real-time translation, facial recognition, all the AI features being built into operating systems and apps. And on the surface, this is useful technology. NPUs make AI features faster and more power efficient. But here is what most people do not realize. The NPU is programmable. Software can send tasks to it. And the operating system and applications can be designed to rely on the NPU for certain functions. Google has been very public about integrating AI features into Chrome. Real-time translation, automatic captions, image analysis, phishing detection, smarter autofill. All marketed as helpful features. And all require machine learning models. Models that run most efficiently on an NPU. Google has been working with hardware manufacturers, Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, to optimize Chrome specifically for NPU acceleration. There are already Chrome flags, experimental settings, that offload certain tasks to the NPU if your device has one. And in future versions of Chrome and processors, that offloading is going to become standard, automatic, and in some cases mandatory for certain features to work. Now think about what that means. If Chrome is not just software running on your device, but is directly interfacing with a hardware component at the processor level, it becomes much harder to fully remove or replace. Even if you uninstall Chrome, even if you delete every visible trace, if there are NPU drivers, firmware hooks, or background services that Chrome installed to communicate with that hardware, those can persist, and they can continue collecting telemetry, usage data, hardware identifiers, and behavioral signals sent back to Google, even when you think Chrome is gone. This is not hypothetical. This is how deeply integrated system-level software works. Antivirus programs do this. VPN clients do this. Any software that installs kernel-level drivers or hardware interfaces leaves traces that survive standard on installation. And because the NPU operates below the level of the operating system's normal application sandbox, it is extremely difficult for average users or even experienced users to audit what it is doing or block its network communication without advanced firewall rules and packet inspection tools most people do not have and do not know how to use. There is more. Google has been pushing something called the Privacy Sandbox, APIs built into Chrome that are supposed to replace third-party cookies with privacy-preserving alternatives. But privacy researchers have found that it does not eliminate tracking. It just centralizes it. Instead of third-party advertisers tracking you with cookies, Chrome itself tracks your behavior, categorizes you into interest groups, and shares those categories with advertisers. The tracking happens inside the browser. Google argues this is more private because your raw browsing data never leaves your device. But the outcome, advertisers knowing your interests and demographics, is functionally the same. And if Privacy Sandbox is running on NPU accelerated machine learning models, it becomes even more opaque. You cannot inspect what an NPU is doing in real time the way you can inspect network traffic. The processing happens in hardware, in silicon, invisibly. Google has filed patents on using on-device machine learning for ad targeting. The language talks about analyzing user behavior locally to build interest profiles, without sending raw data to the cloud. That sounds good until you realize the profile itself, the output of that local analysis, is still shared with advertisers. And the model doing the analysis is proprietary, closed source, and running on hardware you cannot audit. You are being tracked and categorized by a black box inside your own processor, and you have no practical way to see what it is doing or stop it if you are still using Chrome. This is the future Google is building, a future where your browser is not just software you install and uninstall. It is infrastructure, embedded in your hardware, optimized at the silicon level, integrated so deeply into your operating system and processor that removing it is like trying to remove firmware. Technically possible if you know what you are doing, but far beyond what any normal user would attempt. And while this is happening, while Google is crippling extensions that protect you and hardwiring Chrome into your processor, they are also facing the largest antitrust investigations in the company's history. In 2024, a U.S. federal judge ruled that Google is a monopolist that illegally maintained dominance in search and search advertising. The Department of Justice is considering remedies that include forcing Google to sell Chrome entirely. European regulators designated Google as a gatekeeper under the Digital Markets Act, requiring them to offer users genuine choice. These are not minor legal actions. These are existential threats to Google's business model, and the timing of Manifest v3 enforcement and NPU integration is not coincidental. Google knows regulatory pressure is increasing. They know users are becoming more privacy conscious. They know competitors like Brave and Firefox are gaining ground, so they are locking in their advantages now while they still can. Manifest v3 weakens the tools that let you escape tracking. NPU integration makes Chrome harder to remove. Privacy Sandbox centralizes ad targeting inside the browser, where it is harder to regulate. And all of it is marketed as innovation, as security improvements, as better user experience. But the actual effect is to give you less control, less privacy, less choice. So what do? You leave. You leave Chrome now before May 20th, before Manifest v3 enforcement, before you're stuck browsing a web that feels like 2005 again, and you move to a browser that is not built by an advertising company, that does not have a financial incentive to track you, and that actually respects the idea that your browsing behavior is your private business. There are two browsers I recommend, Brave and LibreWolf. Brave is a privacy-focused browser built on Chromium, the same open-source engine Chrome uses. That means it is fully compatible with the web. It renders pages exactly like Chrome. It supports Chrome extensions, but Brave strips out all of Google's tracking and data collection infrastructure and replaces it with privacy-first features. Brave blocks ads and trackers by default. No extension needed. It blocks third-party cookies by default. It has fingerprinting protection built in. It has HTTPS upgrading. It has a built-in Tor mode for private browsing that actually hides your IP address. And critically, Brave still supports Manifest v2 extensions. The developers have explicitly stated they are maintaining web request API support. That means uBlock Origin, the full version, works in Brave exactly as it does in Chrome today. No limitations, no compromises. Brave is also fast. Independent benchmarks consistently rank it among the fastest browsers available, often faster than Chrome, because it blocks ads and trackers before they load. Pages are lighter, they load quicker, they use less data. For users who want a direct Chrome replacement, something that looks and feels familiar but does not carry the surveillance baggage, Brave is the most seamless transition. You can install it, import your bookmarks and passwords from Chrome in about 20 seconds, install your favorite extensions, and be up and running without any learning curve. LibreWolf is a different approach. It is a fork of Firefox, based on Firefox open source code but modified specifically to maximize privacy and security out of the box. LibreWolf removes all the telemetry that Mozilla includes in standard Firefox. It disables Pocket. It removes sponsored content. It pre-configures privacy settings to their most protective levels. It includes uBlock Origin pre-installed. It connects to Firefox's extension library, so you have access to all the same add-ons. And it is developed by a community of privacy advocates with no corporate ownership, no advertising partnerships, and no business model that depends on collecting user data. LibreWolf is for users who want maximum control and are willing to spend a few extra minutes configuring things. Both browsers are excellent. Both are faster than Chrome. Both are dramatically more private. Both will continue to support the ad blocking and privacy tools that Chrome is killing. And both are free, open source, and actively maintained. Now, here is your 30-second migration guide. Step 1, download Brave from Brave.com or LibreWolf from LibreWolf.net. Both have installers for Windows, Mac, and Linux. download and install. Takes about 60 seconds. Step 2, open your new browser. Go to Settings, find the Import Data option, select Chrome as the source, click Import. Your bookmarks, passwords, and history transfer automatically. Takes about 10 seconds. Step 3, set your new browser as your default. On Windows, go to System Settings, Apps, Default Apps, and select your new browser. On Mac, open your new browser, go to Preferences, and click Make Default Browser. Step 4, install any extensions you rely on. For Brave, that is the Chrome Web Store. For LibreWolf, that is Firefox add-ons. Search for the extensions you use and install them. Most popular extensions are available in both. Step 5, delete Chrome. On Windows, go to Settings, Apps, find Google Chrome and uninstall. On Mac, drag Chrome from Applications to Trash and empty it. Do not just stop using Chrome and leave it installed. If it is on your system, it can still run background processes, sync data, and update itself. Remove it completely. That is it. 5 steps. Less than 5 minutes total. And when you're done, you will be browsing on a faster, cleaner, more private browser that does not treat you like a data source to be monetized. One more thing. After you switch browsers, go to myaccount.google.com. Go to Data and Privacy, click on History Settings. You will see options for web and app activity, location history, and YouTube history. Each is a category of data Google has been collecting about you, potentially for years. Click on each one. You can see a timeline of everything Google has stored. You can delete it, and you can turn off future collection. You will also see an option called Auto Delete. Set Google to automatically delete activity older than 3 months, 18 months, or 36 months. Turn that on. And if you are serious about privacy, consider switching your search engine as well. DuckDuckGo, Brave Search, StartPage, and Quant are all excellent alternatives to Google search that do not track you, do not build profiles on you, and do not log your searches in any identifiable way. Both Brave and LibreWolf let you set your default search engine in settings. Change it from Google to one of those alternatives. The combination of a privacy-respecting browser and search engine cuts off the 2 primary mechanisms through which Google monitors your online behavior. The internet is not going to get less invasive on its own. The companies building the tools you use are not going to suddenly decide to collect less data. The advertising industry is not going to regulate itself. The only thing that changes this trajectory is you making a different choice. A choice to use tools that work for you instead of tools that work to extract value from you. Chrome had a good run. For years, it was the fastest, most compatible, most feature-rich browser available. But that era is over. Chrome today is not the tool it was in 2010 or even 2020. It is a data collection apparatus with a browser interface. And on May 20th, the last line of defense you had against that apparatus, your ad blocker, stops working. You do not have to accept that. You do not have to watch your internet experience degrade while Google profits from your attention and data. You have alternatives, real ones, better ones. Brave and LibreWolf are not compromises. They are genuinely excellent browsers that, in many measurable ways, outperform Chrome. They are faster, they are lighter, they respect your privacy. And they are built by organizations that do not make money by surveilling you. Make the switch today, right now. Do not wait until May 20th. Do not wait until your ad blocker stops working and you're staring at a screen full of pop-ups wondering what happened. Take 30 minutes, download Brave or LibreWolf, import your data, set it as your default, delete Chrome, install uBlock Origin if you are on LibreWolf or use Brave's built-in blocking, change your default search engine, and then actually use it. Give it a week. In 7 days, you will have completely forgotten you were ever doing anything different. And every day after that, you will be browsing with the knowledge that what you search for, what you read, what you click on, is yours. Not a data point in an advertising profile. Not a signal in a behavioral targeting algorithm. Not a product being sold to the highest bidder. Yours. The deadline is May 20th.
Now, in addition, now he showed you how to take out Chrome through Microsoft's own app settings of installed programs. That does not clean out everything. I strongly recommend using Revo Uninstaller or Geek Uninstaller, and after it's done the uninstall that's normal, always do the scan and remove registry entries that you don't want anymore. And also, if there were any leftover files, you get rid of them as well. And you'll be a lot happier and safer it's unfortunate the way things are going, but more and more. What's happening to Chrome, I guarantee you there's almost an exact parallel going on in Microsoft Edge browser as well. And I'm not joking. I have reduced my use of Edge browser, except for the main machine that I use here for YouTube research. And I don't care if they have access to that. One day I'll get, shall we say, ticked off enough to change that, but it requires me to plan ahead and make a whole lot of additional changes before I would eliminate Edge. Edge can be removed from many Microsoft Offices, Microsoft operating systems without special tools, but a lot of tools are out there on the web, usually scripts of some kind. And you have to understand and take the risk of running those scripts to remove features that you don't want or you don't use on your system. Most people, I think, by and large, would like to see a return of old Windows operating systems that was just the basic operating system. No AI, no telemetry. 10 has telemetry, but it's nothing compared to what 11 has. And if there's a future Windows 12, that'll probably even have more than, because it's going to be on the foundation of 11, the way it's going to be in the near or present time. So it's a case where if you like privacy, you want to keep your stuff, your business private, you're going to have to start learning some other ways of doing the same thing that are safer and give a respect to your privacy. Anybody got any questions or comments?
Yeah, I don't even use Chrome.
Yeah, two things. The NPU is not something magical. Chrome does not infect the NPU. It does not alter firmware. It does not have the ability to install drivers that you cannot remove. Period.
I wouldn't say that's an absolute, especially the way technology is changing at a very rapid pace.
If Chrome ever did that, Microsoft would sue them out of business.
Well, I'm telling you right now, Edge, I think, is going to copy most everything
That doesn't matter. That's a
Microsoft.
Microsoft product. But if Edge does it, it will be through Copilot, which is a completely different animal. If Chrome does it, it would have to be through something entirely new.
The recent version of Chrome is doing a better job than it ever has before. And that's not a joke. But for example, even at Microsoft, they were using Claude Code to help generate code that will be used in Windows. In Windows and possibly in MS 365. But as of late, they've stopped using Claude Code. They're using Copilot Code, and it's doing a better job for them.
Yeah, well, that's Microsoft's prerogative. They own Copilot. They can do with it what they want. But the claim in the video was that something totally unremovable was being done to your NPU. And that's pure crap.
Well, that remains to be seen.
There is no documentation of that anywhere.
Well,
But in any way, I also Brave, as was mentioned before. If you want to get rid of their AI, you have to pay $60 under Windows.
yes, I mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting. And it is a sad
Yeah.
commentary that they charge on Windows, but they give it free on Linux. And I think really it would be better policy if they gave you the option of the no AI, no wallet, no rewards points on the Windows side as well.
Yeah, well, you can get it if you want to pay.
No, I'm saying without pay. If you can get it free on Linux, it should also be available free on Windows. That's my opinion.
Yeah, in a perfect world.
All right. Hearing nothing else, then I'm going to move on to one more at least. This is a good one. This has to do with backup images.
What good is an image if I can't restore an old backup to a new Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for AskLeo.com. Here's a question. Quote, I'm a good little backupper. I follow all of your instructions and happily use Macrium for regular image and file folder backups. Recently, the video system on my aging PC died and I decided to buy a new PC. I thought I could easily restore the image backup to the new PC, thereby saving me hours of reinstalling my software. But no, I can only restore an image to the same sort of hard disk on the same PC. What a waste! Surely most people will want to replace their whole PC when they have a failure that requires them to think about restoring an image. How many people and in what circumstances find an image backup has been a lifesaver? So, I absolutely understand your frustration, but restoring an old backup to a new computer is not what image backups are for. It's also not why you back up. An image backup includes detailed settings and configuration information for the specific hardware being backed up. When restored to a new/different machine, those settings no longer apply. The backup can still be useful, but not for what you're trying to do. So, when is an image backup useful? Well, I'll look at a couple of scenarios. If your hard disk fails, you don't need to replace your entire computer. Just get a replacement hard drive, perhaps a bigger one to increase capacity while you're at it. Swap out the old drive for the new. That's a perfect scenario for an image backup. In fact, I'd probably say it's the most common scenario where an image backup is going to get used. You restore the backup image to the new hard disk, reboot, and it's as if nothing happened. If the new disk is larger, you might need to fire up a disk manager to extend the partition to use the additional space, but that's about it. The other big scenario for image backups is malware. Now, you can try to disinfect and remove malware, but once you're infected, you've basically lost control of your computer. You may have clean scans, but you never really know that all the malware is gone unless you restore to a backup image taken before the infection. This is another super common use for image backups. There's nothing as reassuring as being able to say, oh, well, darn, my machine's been infected. I'll just restore to last night's backup, and poof, the computer's clean and life goes on. Now, there's a third scenario. The reason images can be so wonderful is that they contain absolutely everything. You don't have to rely on figuring out what needs to be backed up beforehand, so you don't have to worry that you've missed something. However, you don't need to restore an entire image. You can pick and choose what you want to restore to your computer or copy to a new one. If I delete a file today that I later find out I needed to keep, I can go to the image backup tool that I took, say, last night and restore the file. Similarly, your image backup actually makes a handy way to transfer data files when you move to that new machine. So, when you move to that new machine, it is sometimes physically possible to do what you ask. You can restore an image to a different device, reboot, and hope that it works. Windows will do its darndest to reconfigure itself on the fly to what it sees as a massive hardware change. Now, while I admit it's gotten better over the years, it is not something that I would rely on. Remember, the image contains Windows S configured for the old computer's hardware. Booting up onto a different computer is a kind of digital culture shock. Everything Windows knew about the hardware is instantly and massively wrong. Now, often your computer simply won't boot, or it'll run with many problems quickly apparent. But even if things look fine, you can never be sure that some configuration problem isn't hiding, waiting to cause you grief. Now, there are backup programs that attempt to address this issue. They try to reconfigure an image taken from one computer and restore it to new hardware. Macaroon Reflect includes this feature called Redeploy in its professional version. I've used it at least once, and it did okay. There remained a few issues, but it served my needs at the time. If this is a direction you feel you must go, then using a tool like Redeploy would be my recommendation. The bottom line, of course, is that image backups are valuable and useful for many different scenarios. Their primary purpose is to back up your existing computer, not set up a new one. When you move to a new computer, the best solution, for many, many different reasons, is a fresh start with a clean install. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit.
Any comments or questions? Offhand, this I discussed a bit too at the beginning of the meeting. That it's just one of these things where I've had very good luck myself, but I have seen some of what he's talking about. If you take a backup image from one machine and try and put it onto a different machine, you might have good luck. You might have a disaster on your hands. But there are ways around some of it. If you've got if you run into the worst case scenario, you can, if you haven't destroyed it, you've got Windows on that new machine. You can open up the image within File Explorer, and then you can pick and choose, get all your data files. You at least have access to what programs you have loaded on your system, and then you can make choices as to how you're going to get that software reinstalled on the new system and go from there. At least you've got some of the stuff. Settings, that can vary quite a bit. Some settings are just look and feel of Windows. Those might work, but a lot of settings are related to how the machine works on that particular hardware, and therefore will not work correctly on the new one unless it happens to have the same hardware feature. Okay, since it's late, I'll dispense with doing any more presentations. Look at getting the handout. I got actually two handouts. Some of you won't be particularly interested in the second one, but that's up to you. Okay, the first one's out there. That's the articles. Now, the second one is there was a video that I had come across in the last month that gave some system cleaning tips. And so I wrote it up into a text file and you can look at it and decide whether you want to try using it or not. I recommend at least 3 times a year doing this because it may get a lot of extra stuff that your regular cleanup programs are not handling. Another thing that's in the article handout, for those people who have used CCleaner, it has gotten some people bothered, disturbed, whatever you want to call it, about using CCleaner. And I think recently they started making a change because now there's a competition open source program called Fluent Cleaner. And that might be worth looking at as an alternative to CCleaner. Just to be under the standing when you use at least CCleaner. One of the things it does, it looks at your cookies. A lot of places, especially like banks and financial institutions, may put a cookie on your system to help validate you the next time you go into that account. Well, CCleaner will wipe out that cookie. So you got to revalidate who you are, proving that you are the owner of the account you're trying to access. However, in the options, you can go in and you can say, the following cookies are my bank, my financial institutions, some other accounts also. And you move them from the left side to the right side of a double panel. And that way, CCleaner knows not to touch those cookies, leave them as is, while everything else that is in the left panel gets removed. I don't know yet about Fluent. I haven't had time to go look at that one yet as to its policy on cleaning up cookies. Anybody got anything else offhand?
The only thing I was going to say was I did use the restore method to a new SSD when I upgraded the SSD in my 11th gen NUC, and Macro Reflect did a very good job.
Yeah.
I did use another tool to expand the Windows partition.
Right. That's something he only briefly touches upon in that video, that if you put in a larger drive, your image is small and there's a lot of space left unused. And you have to know and use tools to expand that stuff. So that, but that requires moving some of the Windows partitions over first and then expanding the C drive itself.
What I did was I went partition by partition, and
Okay.
I used the clone feature of Macro Reflect actually from the old hard drive, which I put in an enclosure.
Yeah, you can do that too. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier, and I would say the average person would find that a little bit beyond their abilities, and probably wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, but you can use an entire image and then just move some stuff around.
I prefer doing that. It's safer. Also, sometimes on some systems, that extra space that's now available to expand C, instead of using all the space to expand C, I will create a D drive, and then whatever is left goes to the C drive in expansion. And the D drive, the reason why, one of the reasons why I do that, if I don't have the capacity to have a second physical drive in the machine, this is the next alternative. I go in to the page file settings, and I will first set up the D drive for the page file the way I want it done. And that's usually giving it a minimum and a maximum size, do a setting. Then I go to the C drive page file and I eliminate it. It still keeps a 64 megabyte, I think it is, image on the C drive for crashes. When you do a crash, it records what happened in the crash in case either you know how to read it and figure out what the cause was and correct it, or if you get technical support from someone, they may want that crash file to find out what happened and make corrections. Anybody got anything else? You got a background noise, Wayne. All right. If there's nothing else, then I'll call it quits on the meeting for this month. Thursday is Ed Keating's meeting, Understanding Technology, and he usually gets out his notice on Wednesday. Then you have a week from tonight, the day after Memorial Day, will be the Linux SIG meeting.